In the heart of New York City, David Foster sat in his dimly lit office, his head in his hands. At 37, he had spent the last 5 years building CashTech Galaxy, a software company that helped small businesses forecast cash flow. Investors had shown interest, customers loved the product, and growth had been steady until now. His biggest investor had just backed out of a crucial funding round, leaving the company scrambling for cash. Payroll was due in 2 weeks, and his CTO, Amanda, had already voiced her concerns about the company's future. Employees were starting to sense the tension, and David found himself paralyzed with worry. His mind jumped between worst-case scenarios. What if he had to lay off his team? What if the company folded? What if his reputation was permanently damaged? He wasn't thinking, just spiraling. Then he remembered something his grandfather, a retired Navy officer, had once told him. Worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but gets you nowhere. That snapped him out of it. He needed to stop sitting in the mental rocking chair and start thinking. Write it down and take action. David grabbed a notepad and wrote down 2 questions. What am I worried about? And what can I do about it? The answer to the first was simple: running out of cash and having to shut down the company. The second question, however, forced him into a more constructive mindset. He spent the next hour listing every possible course of action. He could call the investor and try to negotiate. He could reach out to other potential investors. He could look for short-term financing. He could cut expenses immediately and pivot to a leaner business model. For the first time that day, he felt a sense of control returning. Looking at his options, he saw that doing nothing was the only path guaranteed to lead to failure. He decided to act immediately. He picked up the phone and called the investor, hoping for one last conversation, and at the same time, he reached out to an alternative funding source he had met at a recent industry event. Accept the worst and improve upon it. Even after making those decisions, David's mind still raced. What if the investor refused? What if no one else wanted to fund CashTech Galaxy? He felt himself slipping back into worry. Then he remembered a story about Willis Carrier, the entrepreneur who had invented air conditioning. When Carrier was facing a major failure early in his career, he forced himself to imagine the absolute worst-case scenario. He accepted it. And once he had, his mind cleared, and he was able to focus on solutions. David decided to do the same. He took a deep breath and asked himself, what's the absolute worst thing that could happen? The company could shut down. He could lose everything he had built. His reputation could take a hit. But then he took it a step further. He forced himself to accept that outcome. If the company failed, he would survive. He had built something valuable once. He could do it again. He could consult for other startups, help companies implement forecasting strategies, maybe even start a new venture based on the lessons he had learned. Once he accepted the worst, something shifted. His mind, no longer clouded by fear, started working on ways to improve upon that scenario. Maybe he could secure a bridge loan to buy more time. Maybe he could offer customers annual subscriptions at a discount to bring in quick cash. Maybe he could reframe his pitch to investors, emphasizing resilience and adaptability. Instead of drowning in fear, he now had a battle plan. Live in Day-Tight Compartments. The road ahead was still uncertain, but David reminded himself of a principle from Navy Admiral Ernest King. Do everything in your power today, and let tomorrow take care of itself. For the rest of the day, he focused solely on what was within his control. He made more calls, reached out to potential partners, and met with Amanda to discuss cutting unnecessary expenses. The next morning, he walked into the office with a new sense of clarity. His first call was with the investor, no luck. But that same afternoon, another investor agreed to meet. Meanwhile, Amanda had an idea to shift their pricing model to stabilize revenue. By the end of the week, they had secured a small bridge loan and extended their runway. The company didn't just survive, it came out stronger. The Entrepreneur's Anti-Worry Playbook. David had learned one of the most valuable lessons in entrepreneurship. Worry solves nothing. The only way forward was through action. From that day on, whenever a young entrepreneur confided in him about their fears, he would hand them a notepad and say, let's start with 2 questions. What are you worried about? And what can you do about it? CashTech Galaxy eventually thrived, and David became known not just for his company, but for his ability to navigate uncertainty. He had conquered worry, not by avoiding it, but by facing it head-on. And he never sat in that mental rocking chair again. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.